Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to be continuing to share information about discipline and children, as many of you have expressed great interest and have shared your great troubles with toddlers and babies. So, today we're going to be talking about the calm technique and connected parenting. And today we have Jennifer Kolari. Hi, Jennifer.
Hello, how are you?
And Jennifer is a child and family therapist and one of the nation's leading parenting experts and the founder of Connected Parenting. She's author of two books. I absolutely love this book here. Let me see if I can show it here on the screen. Absolutely amazing. This is Connected Parenting, How to Raise a Great Kid. And she also has another book called You're Ruining My Life, but Not Really, Surviving the Teenage Years with Connected Parenting. Jennifer has been featured on television, radio, and her advice can be found in many Canadian and U.S. magazines, such as Today's Parent, Redbook, Parent Magazine, and Canadian Family. She has been helping children and teens and families get connected for over 20 years. This is truly amazing. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
It's truly a pleasure to have you here with us today. Um, so today we're just going to have a chat about the calm technique. So let's start to talk about how did you come to develop this calm technique?
Well, it was many, many years ago. I had finished my undergraduate degree in psychology, and I wanted to do something real with real families and get into some real issues. And I ended up signing up to work at a group home. So this is a group home for street kids. So these are children who were really rescued from the streets. A lot of them had been involved in child prostitution, and they were deeply traumatized. All of them were sexually abused, even physically abused. It was a really tough assignment. And it was a very structured group home. There were lots of rules, and the kids were really hurting. And we were sort of trained not to get too attached to these kids. We were taught that, they're not going to be there for very long, so it's not fair if they get attached to you because it's hard to leave. But something in me just thought, that doesn't make sense. These are babies. These are kids who've been through awful things. They don't have their parents. They're afraid. I couldn't do that. So at night, when it was time to put them to sleep, most of the staff just shut the door and said, stay in your beds. And I couldn't do that. I actually couldn't do it. So I would sit on their beds and I'd rub their backs and I would tell them bedtime stories and I'd sing them lullabies, and they loved it. These tough, scary kids who were really kind of difficult to be around during the day melted into children at night. And one of the things that I found was the next day when I needed them to do things around the house, or they had to follow some of the rules, they were much more likely to do it for me. And the reason for that was we had this connection.
Yes.
There was a nurturing and important connection, and they wanted to comply because they cared about that relationship, and I cared about them. So I was fascinated by that, because what I found was that the more stern, the more strict, the more authoritarian the staff were, the more combative the kids were.
Yes.
And I found that through the nurturing, I was able to get them to comply in amazing ways. I'll tell one quick story before we move on to the next question. And there was one little girl who was really tough. She was very behavioral. Everyone in the house we had special meetings about how to manage her. She was being moved to another group home. And the day before she left, she put her hand on my cheeks and she said, I just want to remember this face, the face of someone who actually cared about me. And so that was a moment I never forgot. That was the moment I knew that I wanted to be a social worker. And it was the moment I realized that compassion and nurturing is very, very powerful. And that was sort of the foundation for Connected Parenting.
Such a beautiful story. To look beyond the behavior and trying to connect with these kids. It's amazing what just you being with them there at night. I wouldn't think that this would be something that would touch them, even older kids. It's quite amazing. So can you tell us?
It's what we all need, right?
Yeah,
we all crave that connection. We all crave that love. So.
Yes, even us as adults, everyone needs it. Everyone needs compassion and love. So for those listening and who have never heard about your work and the calm technique, can you tell us essentially what it is and what it means?
Yeah, absolutely. So after I worked in that group home, I went to school and I studied to be a social worker and went to school for a number of years. And I ended up working in an agency in Toronto that's for children that have learning disabilities. And there was a supervisor there who was trained in a particular kind of therapy called self-psychology. So I won't talk too much about that, but it really fit nicely with what I had learned in that group home and my quest to kind of understand why empathy and nurturing was so powerful and why it was so healing. So she taught me a lot about this, and very quickly, and I talk about this in the book, the first client that I had was a very difficult little girl who had actually been, she'd actually been the product of a rape, if you can imagine, and her mother had decided to keep her. So there were major attachment issues, and this little girl actually used to throw herself down the stairs at the age of 4, literally tumble downstairs, just to get her mother to pick her up and show some love and compassion. So by the time she came to see me, she was cranky, she was miserable, she was nasty, she was really icky. She was a tough kid. And I found her really difficult to work with, to the point where I'd sort of be late for a couple, I'd waste a few minutes before going in the room with her because I actually breathe before sitting with her for an hour. And I remember going back to my supervisor and saying, this is so hard. I want to be compassionate. I want to be empathic. I want to connect with this child, but she's so prickly. She's so mean. She's so nasty. I can't, and I don't even want to. And so my supervisor at the time taught me about a technique called mirroring, which is what I based the calm technique on. And that's a technique where you deeply immerse yourself into what the other person is experiencing before you try and correct the behavior. And she taught me a little bit about this technique. Now, just very quickly, one of the strategies that I would use is I would be a little bit late going into the room with this child. And she would yell at me, you're an idiot, I hate you, how did you ever graduate school? And it was really awful. And I would be sort of therapist-y. I'd learned to do what I did in school, which is to say things like, well, that must make you feel very angry that I was late. And she would say things like, of course it does, you idiot. Like, what are you talking about? Nothing seemed to work that I'd learned to do in school. And when Faye taught me about the mirroring, that finally worked. So one particular day I'm late, coming into the session, she's yelling at me. I ignore the behavior. Now, I don't want people to think that connected parenting is all about ignoring the behavior. You do have to be set limits. Yes. And provide those consequences, but not in the beginning of a conversation, right? That comes after. So first I ignore the behavior, and she's upset because she comes every day to her appointment on time. I am late. She's angry with me, and she's feeling rejected. So I mirror. I say, you know what? This is your appointment. This is your time, and you are never, ever late. And this is not the first time I've been late. I've been late before. And you could see on her face this feeling of being deeply understood. And I know that I saw tears in the corner of her eye. This is a very prickly, tough kid, and I know that it took her breath away for a second. And after that, I use this mirroring technique all the time. So even if she'd insult me and say, oh, your teeth are all crooked on the bottom, they're disgusting. Instead of saying, that's not very nice, that's not how you should talk to somebody, which would just get her angry, I would say, so when things aren't lined up, when things aren't straight, you notice, and that stands out for you. And this is what I would get back. She would say, oh, well, your top teeth are really nice. So I would get something back that was quite lovely and quite positive. Certain children you just can't come at head to head. There may be a point where you have to, but you've got to build the relationship up very strongly in order to withstand that. So that was the foundation, and that sort of moved into the calm technique. So there are 4 things that you're going to do when you mirror to your child. One is you're going to connect. Use your face, use your body, use your empathy to really immerse yourself in what your child is experiencing in that moment. Then you take your agenda, which is please stop this and don't hit your brother and eat your food already, we have to go, and practice your instrument or whatever it is, and you need to put that aside. That comes back later, but in the moment you're just connecting. The A, that stands for affect. This is where the look on your child's face kind of has to match your face. So if they're crying and you're going, oh, honey, and you have a smile, that doesn't fit what they're feeling, right? And they're going to escalate their behavior to try and get the message across that they're upset. So the affect has to match. That makes so much sense. Within reason. I mean, you don't want to seem like you're more upset than your child. The L, this is the listening part. So this is where you use your words. You can clarify, you can summarize, you can paraphrase, and you can wonder out loud. And I'll take you through some examples in a moment. And you do all of those things with the right affect, and that's the calm technique. Now, it sounds easy, but it's actually quite a challenge to learn how to do.
It is.
It's also what I call a counterintuitive technique, which means you're not going to feel like doing it.
Yes.
You're going to feel
It
like
has
saying,
to come
stop
natural.
it, what are you doing?
Yes.
And that doesn't always work. So that's basically the calm technique. And then we can go through some scenarios.
Yeah, and it's definitely not going to come natural because people are so conditioned. We have been taught how to behave towards children. It has been passed down from generation to generation, and this is something that we definitely, once you learn it, has to be practiced day by day.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
so a lot of my subscribers always email me and ask me. They have so much problems with their toddlers who have tantrums. They don't want to cooperate. They don't want to share. They don't want to listen. They have such a hard time, and they don't want to resort to punishment, but they don't know what else to do. So they resort to yelling, to punishment, to time out, and it just seems like that doesn't work. And if it works temporarily, but it seems to disrupt the bond between parent and child. So, can you tell us what can we do with a child, with a toddler? You know, like I would say 3, 4, 5 years old, um, who is throwing a tantrum. Like, how can we apply the calm technique
Yeah.
to
Okay.
situations?
So this is great. So basically, the first thing that's important to understand is even though the mirroring seems counterintuitive, it's actually quite natural for us.
Mm-hmm.
We know exactly how to mirror. We are wired to know how to mirror because that's how we talk to babies, right? So if a baby is coming out of the bathtub and they're crying and screaming, we don't walk up to a baby and go, oh, for heaven's sakes, you have a bath every single night. Nothing has ever happened. Stop it. Nobody would ever talk to a baby like that. You look at the baby and you go, oh my goodness,
Yes,
look
yes,
at you.
yes, yes.
You're cold and you don't like this towel and the towel's scratchy. The baby doesn't know what you're saying, but the baby sees on your face a perfect representation of what they are feeling inside. That stimulates the mirror neuron cells in the brain, which release endorphins, natural opiates, and oxytocin. Oxytocin is a very, very powerful hormone slash neurotransmitter that blocks cortisol. That releases in the baby's brain, calming the baby down and allowing the baby to shift emotional gears, basically. And that's the very intimate relationship between mother and child. And it's a bit complicated to kind of explain in a short time, but that chemical, oxytocin, is a bonding hormone. Yes. It's also known as the tend and befriend hormone, or the love drug. Yes. And there's a few things about oxytocin that mummies and daddies should know. First of all, it's free, which is awesome. You don't need a prescription for it. You never run out of it. It's always available. It is a cortisol blocker. Cortisol is the hormone that makes us upset, that gets us anxious, or gets us angry, or causes your toddler to fall on the floor screaming and yelling. That's cortisol. Oxytocin blocks and suppresses cortisol. Now, that's a very important thing to understand about this. The other thing is it speeds up neuroplasticity, which means it actually makes your children learn faster and make neural connections faster. So we want our children to advance and learn and do well in school. Higher levels of oxytocin ensure that. That's why children who are well loved, who are safe, who feel comfortable, do better in school, not necessarily because they're smarter, but because the brain is wiring itself to be able to take care of those things. Here's what else oxytocin does. It not only is it a cortisol blocker, but it helps the brain to regulate emotions. So it's a very, very significant hormone. And here's the best part. When you use it on somebody, it bounces back and your own brain gets all of those wonderful benefits. I can't think of any more reasons why this is the greatest thing that you can do for your children. But that technique of mirroring is actually quite natural. Now, around the time of language acquisition, which is around the age of 2, 2.5, when children start talking, we stop mirroring as much. Mm-hmm. So now we think about, let's say our 3-year-old or 4-year-old won't get out of the bathtub and they're screaming. Now we go in and we say, enough already. You need to get out of the bathtub now. Look at mommy's face. This is an angry face. Mommy's getting angry. 1, 2, 3, 3.5. Look at your sister. She's already in her pajamas. Right? And it starts to be frantic. So now we enter a phase where we start telling our children that what they're thinking and feeling is no longer a match. Yes. Right? Certain kids can roll with that. More easygoing kids can. Certainly super sensitive children have difficulty with that. children who are unsure of the bond, or a child who maybe has a sibling that's very close in age, so that some of the sort of bonding got stretched because you have multiple young children. Children who are gifted often have a very difficult time because they're super sensitive and they overthink everything. So it's very, very important to use this for all children, this mirroring technique, and to remember that we have somehow dropped it.
Yes.
The other thing that's really important to understand is, as adults, we like when people mirror to us.
Yes.
Right? If we're upset and we've had a hard day, let's say, and we call our mom and we say, "Oh, the kids were awful today. I'm so exhausted. I can't function." And your mother says, "Well, that's what you signed up for as a mom, and that's what I had to do." How do you feel?
That feels terrible. Yeah.
Like, really? That's what you're going to say to me? You want someone to go, "Oh, honey, I know. You know what? It's so hard, and you're never going to break, and you're always on." And
yes.
That's what we want. That's mirroring.
That's what we
right?
all want.
That also gives us oxytocin, and it bonds us and binds us together. So we'll go through how the calm technique actually works, but I also want listeners to really understand this is only the first part of the story.
Yes.
Connected parenting really has two halves. One is the mirroring, the connection, and the calm technique. And by the way, it'll bust a tantrum. It is unbelievable for a tantrum.
Yes, I know. I have used it with my children. It's amazing.
Yes, it really works. And the other is that it allows the relationship to stay very nice and tight and bonded, so that when you do have to come in with consequences, which children very much need, they need structure, they need consequences, they need to know that you're in charge.
Exactly.
They don't want to be in charge. They get afraid and anxious, and their behavior starts to deteriorate if they feel like they're in charge. Yes. And those two things work perfectly together.
I like how you mentioned that it's this is not even if you're bonding with the child and connecting with them, you're not going to be permissive and just allow them to do whatever they want. This is just like the first stage where you want to connect with them, because once you connect with them, you can influence them more and motivate them to cooperate. So I think that
absolutely.
And I have used this technique with my children, and it's quite amazing. Like my husband uses it with them, and I have seen an immense change in my children. My 3-year-old used to have these huge tantrums, and she would cry. She would run away to her room crying every time that she didn't get something or that her sister took something away. And I started using your technique, your mirroring technique, the calm technique, and I would go to her and say, "You look very upset right now. You look tense. I see the tears." And I would connect with her, and right away when I would say that to her, she would calm down and stop crying. As when before I would tell her, "Iris, calm down, just stop crying, stop." And she would cry even louder. So I know that this definitely works when you mirror to the child what you are seeing. You mirror emotions, and you mirror what you see in their face. I would tell her, "I see how angry you are. I see how upset you are." And her face would transform. It was quite amazing. Even with my baby, I do it. So let's talk about babies. Crying babies, fuzzy. You can actually also, and like you said, parents naturally do this with their babies. So although there are some parents who say, "Oh, the baby's just crying to manipulate you. They just want to get you to get them out of the crib." And so what do you say about that? About how can we use the calm technique with babies?
Okay. So it's a fascinating question, because there's actually what's called the euphoric response. So when you mirror to an infant, they'll get this look on their face because they can feel the oxytocin and the natural opiates flooding the brain. Those reward chemicals literally flood the brain, hit the attachment circuitry in the brain, and the limbic system, which is the part of the brain that decides what mood you're going to be in, and literally calms the baby down. And we can experience this too when people mirror to us. When somebody truly gets what we're saying,
yes,
like really gets it, there's this moment of like, finally someone understands, right? So anytime, whether it's a baby or a toddler or a teenager or your mother that's upset, unless you accurately reflect back that you get why they're upset and that they're upset. This is not about agreeing. You don't have to agree with why they're upset. You just have to get that they're upset. When you do that, you're going to see this calming, right? So if a baby is fussing, even if you don't know why they're fussing, if on your face you're going, "I know you don't feel comfortable and you're not happy," and it has to be a little more exaggerated with a baby.
Yes.
You wouldn't do that with your your best friend. You would to a degree, but not quite that much. With babies and toddlers, you almost want to sort of really affect it. When you do that, they'll stop like this.
Yes.
It's amazing. I did a workshop actually for a bunch of moms with infants, and they all had their babies. And one of the babies was, I don't know, the mother was trying to get the sweater. Can't remember if the mother was trying to put a sweater on the baby or get the sweater off of the baby. And the baby was fussing, and that's obvious why the baby was crying in that moment. But the mom she was trying to be mirroring, so she was like, I know, you don't like this sweater. And that was too much. And the baby started to cry more. So I took the baby and I was like, oh, you don't like this sweater and you don't like when mommy pulls it off. The baby doesn't, it's not about language. The baby doesn't need to understand what you're saying.
Yes.
The baby needs to see that the affect matches. And the second I did that, the baby was like, I made like this funny little smile. I also want people to understand you don't only use mirroring with babies or toddlers or anyone when they're upset. You also use it when they're happy.
Yes.
So when they're giggling and they're smiling, you're also going to be naturally, which most of us do anyway. This happens quite naturally. And the more this mirroring takes place, the faster neural pathways grow in that infant's brain. You really have to think of this as brain food.
Yes.
It is emotional nutrition.
It is so
okay, and that doesn't mean you have to answer every whim that your baby has. That's not what this is about. It's about really making those quality connections when you can, because you might have 3 other kids that you're trying to deal with. You can't be mirroring to all of them all the time. But a little bit goes a long way. You'd be very, very surprised.
Yes, definitely. And like I mentioned before, I've seen it with my children. And I just want to give an example. Like, for example, sometimes my 3-year-old would give me a hard time to putting on her coat when we were going outside. And I would say, come on, Iris, let's put on your coat. And we live in a cold place, so we have to have her coat, her hat, her scarf, everything. It's a process, especially with 3 little ones. And she would always just fuzz and not want it on. And she would start crying, and it would be a battle. So I started using your technique with her. And I said, you look so upset because you don't want to put your coat on. You look very angry. You want to go outside, but you don't want to put your coat on. I understand how you feel. I don't like putting coats on either. It's very uncomfortable. But in order to go outside, we need to have our coats on because it's cold. And like when I mirrored back to her, she would calm down and she would be willing to cooperate. And I think the technique helps to build bonds. And I've been using it when my children are happy, as you say. And it's been increasing our bond. It's been creating a really strong bond between us. And I think that's what it's all about when you have children. When you're working with children of all ages, even like you mentioned before, even with teens or older kids, it will work wonders.
It works on everyone. It works on husbands.
Yes, I've been using it with
my mother. It works on everybody.
I have used it with everyone, and it's so amazing. Yeah. So I think you have shared very valuable information today. I really recommend everyone. I don't want to make this video too long. To get this wonderful book. It is amazing. It will change your relationship with your children. Staying connected to our children's feelings and emotions and the different ways they communicate can help us raise our children more compassionately. And I think this world needs more compassion. Can we agree, Jennifer?
Definitely agree with that. Absolutely. And it starts at home.
We need more connection. The bond between parent and child should never be compromised. I think a lot of people compromise the bond over results that we want to see immediately. In any given moment. So the bond and relationship are number one. And if one works on the bond, children will be more likely to cooperate and to listen. It's so amazing. Like once you build that bond with your child and you ask them for something, they're more likely to cooperate when you have that bond and that relationship. So I think it's more important to work on bonds than on discipline and punishment. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for this great lesson. Is there anything that you want to end with?
No, the only thing I would say to people is, even though this seems like a little bit of extra work, people say to me sometimes, oh, I don't know if I have time to do that. My argument to that is you don't have time not to, right? So
yes. Okay, sorry, Jennifer, we lost connection here. So you were saying some finishing words here?
Yes, I was just saying that a lot of people will say, oh, this seems like so much work, I don't have time to do this. And what I would want people to think about is this. You don't have time not to.
Yes.
Because when you put the energy into the beginning of the conversation, you're going to get more compliance. The whole thing is going to go more smoothly, and it's going to improve bonding. The more that you mirror with your children, by the way, the more they naturally do this with each other and you. You don't have to teach them how to do it. They absorb it from you.
Yes.
It's fabulous for social skills. It really is worth doing. It's worth getting invested and making the investment in how to do it. It's a lovely, lovely skill.
It's so wonderful.
Really does
And
work.
I definitely agree with you that I see my children using it with each other, and it's just so heartwarming when I see my 5-year-old telling my 3-year-old, "You look so upset, Iris. You look very angry."
So
Yeah, and it's amazing. Like they copy everything, and it's amazing. It's a life skill that you're passing on to your children that they're going to be using as adults.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I invite you all to visit her at www.connectedparenting.com. She has a lot of resources there, videos, articles, workshops. She also has coaching sessions that she conducts either via phone or in person. And again, her wonderful book. And she also has a book for those of you who have teens. It's called You're Ruining My Life, Surviving the Teenage Years. I should start reading that from now, right, Jennifer? What do you think? Get ready for it.
You're working on it now with the other book. Don't worry.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. It has been a
You're
pleasure
welcome.
talking with you. Thank you all for watching. For more videos on homemaking, education, and simple living, please subscribe. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.